I went to community college when I was a student and when I didn't know that you could still be a writer in the world. And I had a teacher at the community college who absolutely changed my life in the way that I have no doubt that Mark and the other instructors at DMAC are changing your lives. So can you help me thank my former teacher, but also Mark and all of the teachers at DMAC for doing everything they do for us? Can you help me thank them? Um, okay, Mark asked me to read a specific story and I can't find it. Okay, so this is a, a short story because we mostly want to talk about clowns and skateboarding. This is maybe the shortest story in the book, and it's called Cayman. Your mother wouldn't let me bring the ice chest into the house, so I left it in the garage. Earlier, I had cut 4 holes into the styrofoam lid. One of them looked like half a star, which I remember liking. This was years ago, a windswept Sunday. This was Texas. When I returned to the kitchen, she pointed to the sink. She said, "Wash your hands with soap." She was breading flounder. She had been listening to radio reports about that little girl who had been abducted. So had I. Probably I pulled over and gave that man $80 because I thought it would keep you safe. He was parked under the causeway, a hand-lettered sign propped against the tire of his van, as if he were just selling pecans. Your mother had flour dust on her neck. She had already fried okra, boiled potatoes. Soon we would call you to the table and you, our little man, would bolt in like you had heard a starter pistol. You were 7. A boy who liked bedtime stories with fantastic monsters and twisty, unexpected endings. You liked sneaking up on us. You hid behind closed doors and in the laundry hamper, then jumped out screaming and laughing. You loved the word maybe. Maybe I'm a kid who's 1,000,000 years old. Maybe we should be a family with a pet. Maybe someday my eyes will turn blue. Your mother swiped her forehead with her wrist. The kitchen was gummy with the day's heat. The windows were open. Before leaving that morning, I had mowed the yard. You helped me rake. You wore your cowboy boots. And now, with dusk coming on, the cut grass smell was rising and trying to cool everything off. "She's still missing," your mother said. "Now they think that uncle did something." I nodded. I had heard that too, and if it was true, I thought he would get killed in prison. But I didn't want to talk about such things. Instead, I asked, "How's our little man?" "Worn out," your mother said. "He's napping in his room." I'd been all day at the job site, drawing overtime. On the drive home, I'd seen the man under the causeway and pulled over just for a look. Our ice chest was still in the bed of the truck from when we'd gone floundering. I took that as a sign. And he only had one left, which also seemed lucky. I was excited to surprise you. I was excited to hear what you would name it. Now, I said, "I wonder what he'll name it." "He asked for a dog," your mother said. "A pet," I said. "He asked for a pet." "Right," she said. "A dog, a cat, a goldfish. Pets have fur and show affection. Pets aren't deadly." "Goldfish don't have fur," I said. I didn't think she was angry, not really. I took 3 glasses from the cabinet. I said, "And it's not deadly." She fixed me with her eyes. She said, "It's an alligator." "It's a caiman," I said. "There's a difference. It's the size of a shoe." "Not for long," she said. She turned back to the stove. She laid one piece of fish in the skillet, then another. Grease started snapping. "They're smart," I said, repeating what the man had told me. "They won't mate until the river is high. They make sure there's enough water for their offspring. They build nests." "They're cold-blooded," your mother said. "They have scales." "Danny can take it for show and tell," I said. "They bite," she said. "They escape. They escape into sewers and terrorize neighborhoods. They eat regular pets. I laughed at that, but your mother said, "They do." She flipped the fish in the skillet. The sound of frying started up again like distant applause. She blew hair from her eyes, stood with her hip cocked, holding the spatula. The applause quieted. She slipped the fish onto a plate she had covered with a paper napkin to soak up grease. She put 2 more pieces in the pan and watched them sizzle. She said, "Why would that man take that little girl?" "We don't know that he did," I said. "But you think he did," she said. "Yes," I said, "I do." "They could still find her," I said. "But you don't think they will," she said. "I don't know, honey," I said. "Well," she said, "I don't think they will." She lowered the flame on the stove and turned to stare out the window. She was touching her fingertips to her thumb, one after the other, something she did when she was concentrating. The air in the room was shifting. She said, "What would we do if something, it won't?" I said. "Not to him." She nodded, pressed the heel of her palm to her eyes. She said, "We're still getting a dog." "I know," I said. "And you owe me a new ice chest," she said. I poured milk for you, but returned our glasses to the cabinet and opened up 2 bottles of beer. The meal was starting to feel like a celebration, like one of us had gotten a raise or was having a birthday. I found some cocoa mix and stirred it into your glass. "An alligator," your mother said, shaking her head. "Caiman," I said. "It's a caiman." "You know that some husbands bring home candy, right?" she said. "Or roses, or diamonds." "They're poor wives," I said. "They probably just, hey." She said, "Hey. Tell Danny you caught it. Tell him you were fishing and you saw it and you caught it just for him." "You want me to lie to our son?" I said. "I want you to make up a story for him, something with a happy outcome," she said, and turned off the stove. She went to the refrigerator and took out the tartar sauce and a salad she had been chilling. The wind lifted the curtains over the sink and sent a few paper napkins gliding off the counter. Your mother closed the window, and the kitchen went as quiet as a secret. And then, with the wind shut out, we could hear your boots on the floor in the hallway. You were stalking toward us, planning one of your sneak attacks. Your mother sipped her beer. There was flour on her neck. It looked like snow, like a smeared galaxy, and she was smiling a little. I understood what she didn't. You had been awake the whole time, listening to us. You already knew about the caiman, about the flimsy, hopeful story I would tell, about everything else. The only surprise left was that I did believe they could still find that girl. I thought her uncle might prove everyone wrong. Maybe he cooked her favorite meals, played her favorite movies, never touched her. Maybe such extravagant, misguided love was still possible. As a baby, you liked putting your feet in my mouth. You would laugh until you got the hiccups and your toes would move behind my teeth, and sometimes I swear I wanted to bite down, to crush your perfect bones and swallow your body whole. Your mother knelt to pick up the strewn napkins. You were just on the other side of the door now, trying not to giggle and preparing your ambush. Maybe you knew we were on to you, maybe not. I joined your mother on the floor. I felt like we were praying or giving thanks or mourning. The kitchen tile was cool, hard. We were listening to you breathe, waiting for you to strike. We were on our hands and knees, our bodies low to the ground like strange, ancient creatures. Thank you.
Open it up to Q&A. So we can start off with a question. I might start us off just for fun. for a while? As in, almost all your stories take place in Texas, and you grew up there, and although you lived other places, you are there again. Can you talk about how Texas has maybe influenced your work, or even just setting in general, like the hometown setting that somehow always finds its way back into your writing?
Sure. Yeah. S- uh, so the question is, talk about Texas, influence on my work, et cetera. I think my relationship with Texas is I was born and raised and educated there, and I live there again now. And so I'm familiar enough with that part of the country to know that I don't understand it. I really don't understand it. And on a daily basis, Texas breaks and fills my heart. And so I feel like I'm writing as a way to try to make sense of all of this. If I understood it or if I knew it well enough, I would never write about it. So it's an ongoing mystery for me. But then when we talk about setting, there's a thing that's true in Texas that might be true from a different lens in Iowa. I'd be interested to know if any of you guys feel this way. But in Texas, if you're not in a city, there's really only the sky. Like that's kind of all there is. It's just sky. And everybody talks about, the jokes about everything's bigger in Texas and things like that. And to a certain degree, that's true. But what no one talks about, if you're surrounded by things that are so big, no one talks about how small that makes you feel. It makes you feel incredibly, incredibly small and powerless. So you're constantly humbled. And for me, I love that. I much prefer to feel small and insignificant than like large, right? But how people react to that feeling small is different. Some people like me feel great comfort with it. Other people, it makes them feel insecure and they want to exert their will or prove how strong and big and powerful they are. And both of those are fairly interesting responses to me, and so I kind of follow those kinds of things into the story. The other thing, the last thing I'll say is that for me, I've never been able to separate setting from character. It feels like setting forms character, and it's an easy thing to kind of illustrate, which is, so we're in this room, you guys, there's so many of you here, you're so kind to show up, and we're seated in a nice size kind of theater. If the same number of people were here and I were doing this Q&A in a bathroom stall, it would feel really different than it feels right now, right? Like where we are affects what we do and what we say. And so setting stories in Texas is a way to say this only happens here, and because it only happens here, I want to pay attention to it, because I think what happens is, because Texas is so big, because Texas is so varied, if you hold a mirror up to Texas, what actually reflects back is the country at large. And I don't know that that's true anywhere else, Yeah.
That's a question. Yeah.
What is your process when it comes to publishing your work, and how different does it feel from your first book or story to how it is now?
My process for publishing my work is I send it to a bunch of editors and they all reject it, and and then eventually someone kind of takes pity on me. That's kind of it. And I'm making a little bit of a joke, but not too much of a joke, especially if we're talking about like sending out stories or something like that. But I've never been I don't get discouraged easily. So, you know, like, if you're going to reject my work, who cares? Like, it doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't hurt my feelings. It might make me think you're a loser, you know, but it doesn't make me think, oh, this story sucks or something, you know. And how has it changed from my first book to now? I don't know that it has. I think publishing has changed in a lot of ways since I've been in the game, but I don't think my relationship to it has changed. I think there's a certain kind of writer, and maybe when you're starting out, you're kind of susceptible to this kind of thinking of, okay, I've written this thing and I don't know if it's any good, so I'm going to send it out, and if it gets accepted or it wins an award or it, you know, any number of things, then I'll know that it's good. I'm sure I felt that at some point. But how I feel now and how I felt for a long time is that I'm going to work my tail off on stories and books, and I'm not going to let anybody see it until I love this thing, because I've worked my ass off on it. And then once I've worked on it so long, and I don't think I can do it any better, and I feel like, oh, I love this thing so much that I want to share it with people, then I send it out in the world, and if they like it or if they don't is kind of irrelevant, because I already love it. I'm not waiting for somebody else to give me permission to love this thing. And that's maybe that's helpful in some way, of like, don't send something out, whether it's writing or art or music or anything, and wait for the votes to come back in to tell you, is it good or not? Wait to put something in the world because you love it, and then if somebody else loves it, wonderful. If somebody else hates it, who cares? You already love it, you know? Yeah. Hi, sorry.
Is there a specific place or time that you feel the most motivated to write?
No. I've said this before, probably in this room. I say it all the time. Like, I really hate writing. I really, really violently hate writing. It's so incredibly difficult. It's one of the few things that gets harder the longer that you do it. Most things that we do in our lives, they're really hard at the beginning, and they get easier. Walking, talking, riding a bike, swimming, whatever. It's hard at the beginning, and then it gets easier. Writing is the exact opposite. Writing feels really kind of easy at the beginning, and the longer you do it, the harder it gets. And so it's so unfathomably difficult to me that I never want to write. Like, I will find all kinds of ways not to do it. But I desperately crave the feeling of having written. I love following my imagination into things that I'm curious about. I love language. I absolutely love language. So I feel better, and I feel like a better version of myself. I feel more involved in the world and the people around me after I've written. So I feel so much better after I've done it, but I hate doing it. So in a certain way, like, no, I never feel motivated to write, but I know that, like, I'm going to feel better after I do it, so I just do it every day. Yeah. You sure? Yes.
Super dorky kind of craft question.
All good.
But for Cayman that we were just hearing, I was curious when you decided to go second person. Like, if you knew at first, I'm going to write about Cayman, or I'm going to write about, like, a family relationship, but when, because that seems like really important.
Yeah.
Right? And like that idea of the secret, of telling secrets is like a
Yeah.
thing, but it seems like the kid probably wouldn't have heard about the
Yeah.
chewing through your, like,
Yeah.
the actual secrets come through because it's an address after.
Yeah.
So I was wondering.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's a great astute question. I don't It's a great question. Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer. But I remember two things about writing the story. I know that I know exactly what started the story, and that is that I was in a pet store buying food for my dogs, and I heard there was a woman who had a young kid. I don't remember if it was a boy or girl, but a young kid sitting in the shopping cart. They were going up the aisle, and I remember the mom telling the kid, pets aren't deadly. Like they were having a conversation, and maybe the kid had said like, what's the difference between a pet and a lion or whatever? I don't know, but I just remember her saying pets aren't deadly. And I just thought, like, is that true? Like, is that actually true? Is that a working definition of a pet? And so that was just in my head for a million years, and then I finally wrote the story. And the other thing that I remember about it is that I probably tried 50 different endings for the story. Like the thing that you're talking about to a certain degree of like where the kid sneaks up on them, that is easily number 50 of 49 tries that had failed miserably before that. But I think it was always the father addressing the kid. And that story's been out in the world a long time, and people have been very, very kind to it. And I hear all kinds of, and it's very flattering, but people will come up and say like all kinds of thing of like, oh, the kid or the mom is dead now, and that's why he's saying it this way. And I'm like, cool, awesome. Like, you're the first person that's ever thought of that, including me. Like, I didn't know, but that doesn't, but I feel like that reader could be as right about it as I could. Probably they're more right about it than I am. But I do think it was kind of always in second person, maybe because it started with that mom saying pets aren't deadly, you know? Yeah, yeah.
I was wondering, do you write like consistently between first and second point of view, or does it like change a lot between stories?
It changes all the time, and I think I've written in all the different points of view, and it just feels to me like, going back to your question, like it feels to me like the characters and to a certain degree the voice dictates what point of view it's going to be in, you know. And so I feel like if the character avails themselves as someone who's going to have an interesting voice, then I want the reader to hear from them directly. If they don't have an interesting voice, but they have a more interesting story, then I can put it in third person or something. Yeah.
You've spoken a bit about like, you know, procrastination and lack of motivation to write sometimes.
It's a very, very inspiring talk I'm giving. Yeah.
Especially with things like writer's block, how do you go about addressing that? Like, what gets you to be like, okay, I have to do this?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, and there's kind of two questions in there. So one is, what gets me to feel like I have to do it is what I was saying before of like I crave both the feeling of having written. Like I think it's similar to people who run and they crave that runner's high kind of thing. Whereas I am not a runner. I can't imagine ever being a runner. Every time I run, I just feel like crap. But everybody says there's this runner high thing, and so they're chasing that. I'm chasing that exact same feeling of having written. And I can be a little bit more specific about it, and that is that what I'm chasing, both as a reader when I read Mark's stories, when I read my students' stories, when I'm reading a published book, what I'm after as a reader is the same thing that I'm after as a writer, which is surprise. I want something to surprise me. And it can be a character, it can be a revelation, it can be language, but I just want to be surprised. And that feeling is so intoxicating to me that I'm willing to do the work to find it. With the other part of your question, which is writer's block, just don't really believe in it. I just think like it feels kind of like I'm censoring myself. It feels like woo-woo to me. It feels like, do surgeons have surgeon's block? You know, do I don't know, pick any other profession, and are they like, oh, I can't go to work today? Okay, great, you're fired. Like that doesn't compute for me. But what I do think about is what's behind it. Why is someone not wanting to write? Like what's keeping them? And I think what is always keeping someone from writing is their expectations are too high. They're putting too much pressure on the work. And so if you're feeling blocked, what I would say is find a way to lower your expectations and understand that that does not in any way suggest that the work that you're eventually going to put into the world or turn into Mark or do whatever you're going to do with it, it doesn't mean that you don't have low expectations for the work. What it means is you have low expectations for getting the work done. And once the work is done, once you start writing again, you can raise your expectations. But the way to start writing is to lower your expectations. You know, there's plenty of writers who say, I write 1,000 words a day. And if that feels like too much, what if you just write 100 words a day? If you write 100 words a day, you're going to pile up pages. And also, you're not saying, I'm only going to write 100 words a day. You're saying, I'm going to write at least 100 words a day, you know? So, yeah. Yes, sir?
Do you ever find it hard to, like, what's the word? Like, articulate, like what you're trying to get across to the reader? I guess would be the best way to phrase it.
Yeah, because like we were saying over here, writing's fucking hard, you know? So yeah, absolutely. But the only thing that I would say more specifically about the way that you phrased the question is I have never written a story. Maybe I've written some essays or something, but I've never written a piece of fiction where I've wanted to get something across to the reader. I've never had any kind of agenda of like, I have this grand idea in my head and I want to teach you about it. That's never once occurred to me. What always happens is, like kind of what I was saying with Mark's question about Texas, is like, I don't understand something. I don't understand it. So I'm writing from a place of curiosity rather than confidence. So instead of saying like, I know everything you need to know about this, read this book and I'm going to transfer my knowledge into your head or my ideas or my argument, it's never once happened to me. So the idea of like, do I have trouble articulating what I want the reader to take away? Never, because I don't want them to take away anything. I trust them to find what they need in the stories. But do I have trouble writing sentences that are going to reward the reader's attention? I've never written a sentence that didn't try to kill me. Like, really, yeah. Yes, sir.
I've got a question about how you approach balancing out the dialogue with the descriptors.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, could you give your thoughts on what makes good dialogue?
Sure, yeah. So dialogue is a thing that, it's a wonderful question. Dialogue is a thing that feels so confusing to so many writers. And it's actually one of the easiest things to teach. And so in terms of balancing dialogue and description, it's something of a sleight of hand trick, because what you're doing is you're using the description to kind of immerse the reader so that they can picture the characters in that space. And when they can picture the characters in that space, they can hear them far more clearly. If you just gave us a dialogue exchange where there's no description, we would feel out to sea. we would feel like we can't concentrate on what the characters are saying because I don't feel rooted in the scene. But kind of like what we were talking about before, if we're going to write the dialogue of this room, we would want to know what this room feels like compared to like if we had it in a bathroom stall, right? And then dialogue is there's another trick, and it's like understand that each speaker has a desire, and everything they say is trying to achieve that desire, right? Like there's never a conversation happening on the page or in real life where someone doesn't want something out of it. And what they're saying is trying to advance their agenda. And it can be entirely positive, it can be entirely loving, but they still have an agenda and they want something out of it. And so if you just ask yourself, okay, what does the character want out of this exchange? And what would they say in order to try to get it? That's half your job. Then do the same thing for the other character. And it's most interesting when they don't want the same things. You know, when one character wants to go to the movies and another character wants to stay home. Have that conversation and have them both trying to get what they want. And it becomes a really, really interesting conversation because they're at odds. And then if you can show the room that they're in or the car that they're in, it just animates in the reader's imagination. Yeah. Yes. Sure.
In your introduction, we heard that you were pretty involved in competitive skateboarding and that you credit skateboarding as one of your greater inspirations. Or I guess, how does skateboarding influence your writing? Is the personal creative influences that are shown in competitive skating, does that kind of inform your writing process, or are they separated in your life?
Thank you. Skateboarding and writing are incredibly tangled up in my life, and it's less about competitive skating, and it's more about what it feels like to be a skateboarder. And I could bore everybody in here for hours about what that feels like. But ultimately, what it feels like is the same thing it feels like to be a writer, which is you're not part of mainstream society. Like you look at the world differently than everybody else does. And what makes everybody else feel comfortable and safe and to a certain degree loved and accomplished, none of that matters. None of it matters. And because you're on the margins of mainstream society. And that can be a very uncomfortable place to be. It can also be a very productive place to be, and also makes other people really uncomfortable, you know, because what matters to them does not matter to me. Like, it matters so much more to me what you can do with 26 letters and their infinite combinations than how much money you have in the bank. Like, I don't care, you know? The same way when a skateboarder is like walking down the street, they are paying attention to how high are the curbs? What's the slope of a handrail? What's the concrete like running up to the handrail? So you're paying attention to different things, and it's that distance between what normal people pay attention to and what writers and skaters pay attention to that defines us. You know, I mean, I can go on and on. We'll see what other people want to talk about. Yeah. Yes, I'll get you.
When did you start skateboarding?
I started skateboarding, I think I was 13 years old, and it was because I saw the movie Back to the Future. And I don't know if people still see that movie anymore, but in that movie there was Marty McFly, Michael J. Fox. He had a skateboard, and he would get around town by on his skateboard, he would hold onto a car bumper and ride behind the car. And I thought that just seemed like the coolest, funnest thing, and I wanted to do that. And so then I did that, and it was boring. But I had already fallen in love with skateboarding, and so I like stepped on a skateboard to try to do that. And 40-something years later, I've never stepped off. You know, yeah.
Does writing bring you
The question is, does writing bring me fulfillment? I mean, it's an incredibly deep, complicated question. Like, and I don't want to be cavalier with it. I think the process of writing brings me fulfillment. I think showing up every day and doing the labor and flexing my imagination and focusing on language in ways that most people don't, I think that brings me fulfillment. But it's like the labor does it, not the book. I mean, I love coming and talking with you guys. I really genuinely love this. That all feels kind of like window dressing compared to being alone and doing this thing that is so incredibly difficult because it's difficult. Like that's fulfilling. The other stuff, it's nice, it's wonderful, but it's not as fulfilling as the labor itself, you know? Yeah. Yes.
Kind of bouncing off that skateboarding question. How
Great.
prevalent
Let's go away from these like deep, heady questions that people are asking.
The skateboarding question, like how prevalent is that in your life today? Like how frequently do you still skateboard today?
Probably 4 to 5 times a week. One of the reasons, so Mark kindly mentioned that I ran the creative writing program at Harvard for 11, 12, a long time. And one of the reasons that I left and took a job in Texas was because I thought the weather's better in Texas and I could have a backyard with a ramp. So I have a ramp in my backyard that I skate all the time. I skate a lot. But guys, like, I'm here. There's snow on the ground in Iowa. I'm giving up skating to be with you. So I hope you understand how much I love you. Yeah. The last time I was here, I'm sorry again.
Skate park downtown is thawed right now.
It's thawed. Well, I know I got to catch a flight because when I looked at the weather, it was like there's going to be a snowstorm, and so I didn't bring my board. But last time Mark took me down there, and it looks awesome. And now I know all these skaters who are like, "You went to Des Moines? How did you go to the park?" And I'm like, "No." And then they just send me all the clips of them like ripping ass in the park. Yeah.
Has your relationship with language changed a lot since you started writing, or has like it always been something that like fascinated you?
I think both. I think it's always fascinated me, but I think it's also changed. I think it's also deepened. I think my relationship with language has intensified over the years, to the point where like I'm doing pretty well in this Q&A. I think I'm doing pretty well. But if we're in like everyday life, if you and I are just hanging out, you will suffer moments where we're in a conversation and I will be dead silent because I'm trying to like organize the language in my head and I just keep revising it. And it drives everybody in my life fucking crazy. But it's because I'm thinking like, oh, I can't say this word because it's gonna send us down this path and it's overwhelming. But it's an intense love of it that makes me want to honor it in a certain way. And I think that's always been there, but it's certainly intensified. I know I missed someone. I'll get, yeah. You're good, bud. Yeah.
Oh, okay. How did you first gain like the confidence to become a writer, and what advice do you think you could give to like others who do not have that like same kind of confidence to become a good writer like you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to a certain degree, it comes. I can give you kind of 2 answers. See, I'm doing that thing. I'm doing the thing. It's happening right now. there's two answers that I can give. Both are true. One, I mentioned earlier when I asked you guys to applaud for Mark and the other instructors. So I grew up loving to read, and I went to community college, and all of the books that I was reading were by dead people. And so this, Mark has heard me say this before, I didn't understand that books were still being written. It sounds like a joke, but it's the God's honest truth. I did not understand books were still being written. I thought they'd all been written, writers were extinct, and our job was to read as many of the books as we could. That's really what I thought. And I was in community college, and I was in a world literature class. We're reading the Iliad and the Aeneid and Don Quixote and those things. And I worked very hard on my essays, and the instructor knew that. And so he came, like I can still picture it to this day, he came across the classroom and he put a ticket on my desk and he said, "You should go to this." And what it was a complete mystery to me. I had no idea what it was, but he had become a mentor for me, and so I would do anything. So I walk into an auditorium, and an hour later I walk out knowing that I have to spend my life trying to be a writer. And what changed in that moment was I laid eyes on a live, breathing writer reading from a book that he had written. And so now that I knew that it was possible, now that I knew that there were still writers in the world, I knew that if I didn't try, I would regret it for the rest of my life. But there was no confidence there. There was, being completely honest, I had no reason to believe, I had zero confidence that I could do it. I just knew that I had to try, or I wasn't going to be able to live with myself. So there's that. And then if we get into confidence, it does kind of go back to skating, which is like, certainly if you're a serious skateboarder, or even if you're just a kind of like a skateboarder who skates every once in a while, you try the same thing again and again and again. And sometimes you're getting hurt, sometimes you're breaking bones, you need stitches, you're getting frustrated. But if you're a skater, you keep trying it until either you ride away or you can't skate anymore because you're too hurt or you're too tired or whatever. And so when I realized there were still writers in the world, and I knew that I had to try, what am I going to do? Give up? Like, that doesn't compute for me. Like, I want to see if I can ride away from this trick of being a writer. So I'm gonna break some bones. I'm gonna need some stitches. I'm gonna get frustrated. It's gonna take unbelievably long. Okay, sign me up. You know? Yeah. Yes, sir.
So I have two questions. How old were you when you published your first book? And what advice would you have for someone who's looking to also publish their first book?
So I think I was 33 when I published my first book, I think. And the advice that I have is publish the book that you want out in the world. Like, don't publish something just because somebody will give you a publishing contract. Like, I know too many writers, Mark knows too many writers who publish a first book because somebody offers them some money or offers them a publishing contract, and then they go on to become very big stars, and they disown that first book because they published it too early, or it was a bad book or something like that. So you only get to publish your first book once. You only get one shot at that. So make sure that it's the book that you want to be the one that introduces you to readers around the world. Yeah. Yes.
As somebody who spent my entire life wanting to get into skateboarding, what are some pieces of advice you'd give me?
That you've wanted your entire life to get into skateboarding, but you haven't yet?
Yeah.
What's the problem? Like,
I just haven't gotten around to it. Like,
okay.
What's some advice you'd give me when starting?
Wear a helmet. And I mean, don't get frustrated. Don't get frustrated. Like, the first time that I ever stepped on a skateboard when I was going to try to ride behind a car, I stepped on the skateboard and it just like, it was stationary and it just like shot out from under me and I landed on my back and like my back is all torn up. And like I think about that moment of like, what if I just hadn't gotten back on the board? Like this thing that I love so much, like I was this close to never getting back on it. But I felt something, and I have a very high tolerance for being frustrated. Like where most people get frustrated, I don't. I just try to figure things out. So you're gonna fall, but that's okay, and just don't get frustrated. Yeah. Also push with your, make sure that you have your front foot on the board and you push with your back foot, because if you have your back foot on the board and you push with your front foot, it's called Mongo pushing, and then you get ostracized. Yes.
I was actually about to mention Mongo. So, I'm originally from Texas too. I grew up on South Padre Island.
Oh.
I grew up skateboarding and surfing. I also did MMA. I still currently compete in MMA. Did you compete when you were in karate? Also, skateboarding for me was like toxic relationship. It hurt so bad, but I would keep getting the board and just retrying the trick.
Exactly.
Landing primo, just hurting a lot, but.
See, speaking my language. Landing primo means when instead of landing with the wheels on the ground, you land like with the board perpendicular and your feet land on the edge of the board, and it hurts so bad. So I don't know how you know this about me, but I'm very flattered and only a little bit afraid. So I've always been like a decent skateboarder, and I'm like, I can do a lot of things and it brings me such immense joy. But in a certain way, the greatest thing that ever happened to me as a skateboarder is that I'm pretty good, but I was never good enough to go pro. I wanted to go pro. I wanted to be good enough, but the best thing that happened is I was never good enough. So I've never asked skateboarding to be anything other than this thing that I love. And I probably have a toxic relationship with it too, because it abuses me all the time. But I love it, and I've never asked it to be anything other than that. But what happened is I was finding some success, and I was on this skateboarding tour, and I broke my foot. And so I couldn't skate for a long time, and I was starting to kind of go crazy because I'd always been so physically active. But then I couldn't skate, so I enrolled in MMA, which everybody called it jiu-jitsu, but nobody really quite, it wasn't a thing yet. And I loved it because I loved all of the angles, but I never competed because as soon as my foot was strong enough to skate again, I just went back to skating. And like, I'd rather beat myself up than have somebody else beat me up. And so I just went back to skating. Yeah. Yes, and then I'll get you.
Hi, if we were stuck on a deserted island and we could only read one of your works,
Oh.
which would you recommend and why? Like for the rest of our lives.
I guess I would just pick the longest one so that you could use a page a day to start a fire. I think that would be my answer. I think people respond to different things, and I am the least helpful person to tell you what you're going to respond to.
I guess you stuck on the island. One of your pieces that you could read the rest of your life and commit to memory. Which one are you?
I wouldn't do it. I would take somebody else's book. I really would. I would take somebody else's book. Yeah, I would set my book on fire. I would set it on fire. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think being involved in MMA had anything to do, or like an effect on your discipline
MMA, no. And again, my like I was in those classes for a very short amount of time. Like that is not a big part of my life. But I've never had a problem with discipline, and I think it comes down to, I think it does come back to skating of I am just willing, and this fellow back here I'm sure is the same way. I'm willing to just annihilate myself, and I'm willing to work on something for far longer than you would think possible in order to get this one split second feeling. So I've never had a problem with discipline, and I think a certain degree of that comes from skating. But I talk with my students all the time because a lot of them do struggle with discipline. They're brilliant. They're incredibly, incredibly gifted. They're far more gifted as writers than I ever have been or will be. But some of them do struggle with discipline. And the way that you kind of get past that is there's a very like helpful definition, and it's discipline is remembering what you want. And so what is it that you want? Do you want an A in class? Do you want to have a book out in the world? Do you want to learn a skateboarding trick? When you're thinking like, okay, I'm going to take the night off, or I'm going to put off my assignment till tomorrow, or I'm not going to work on the book today. Ask yourself, what do you want? I want to get an A in Mark's class. I want to learn a frontside blunt. I want to have a book out in the world. Remembering what you want enforces that discipline. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about your writing process. You mentioned obviously that you got the inspiration for that short story from like a conversation that you overheard. How much planning do you do before you actually start writing? Like once you heard that conversation, that was like the inspiration, but then like did you like have to think about like all the characters beforehand, like the story structure or any of that, or do you just start writing?
Neither. What I do is I give myself as much time as possible, and usually we're talking years, to forget the idea. And because I take things through so many drafts, I'm such a slow writer that I've never been one of those writers who gets an idea and then I immediately go and write and start writing it because I don't trust the idea enough. But if I hear a conversation in a pet store and then I remember that conversation 5 or 10 years later, then I think, oh, this idea has withstood 5 to 10 years, so it will probably withstand the number of drafts I'm going to have to take it through. So I'm actively trying to forget the ideas. And if I can't forget them, that's when I write them. I don't do any planning at all. I just try to follow the characters or the story's lead. You know, like I think a lot of times people will think, if you're not a writer, you'll think like, oh, the writer is driving the car that is the story. The writer is in charge and they're deciding where the story goes. And I've had students over the years, because I don't believe in that, and so they'll say like, oh, you're saying the character is driving the car and the writer is in the passenger seat, so you're just following where the character goes. And I'll say like, yeah, that's pretty good, that's pretty close. But how it actually should feel for me is the character is driving the car, the secondary characters are in the passenger seat and in the back seat, and the writer is locked in the trunk. And so it's scary, it's dark, it's bumpy, you have no idea what's going on, you have no idea where you're going, and then the car stops, the engine is turned off, and then the trunk opens and all this light comes in, and you realize that you are exactly at the one place you were always meant to be with the story. That's how it feels. That's how it feels. Yes, sir.
Let's maybe have like 2 more questions.
Okay, I've got this person here, and then could I have, dude, there's like a lot of hands. This okay, okay, you, and you.
With your approach to writing, do you find yourself focusing on the larger image and working your way down to smaller details, or smaller details and working your way towards the bigger picture?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to try to go fast. The question is, do I focus on the large things and work to smaller details, or small things work to the larger things? Always, I start small, and focus on something so with such attention that it goes larger if I've done my job. Because if you say, like, I want to write about the universe, you might write about the universe, but you're never going to write about the brick wall that's right in front of you. If you write about the brick wall that's right in front of you, you will always write about the universe. So for me, it's always in the details. Yeah. Yes. You. Yeah.
This is with skateboarding, but throughout your entire life, has there been any points where you haven't had motivation to do it?
Skating?
Yeah.
Yes, but it's usually in the middle of a skate session where I am killing myself trying to learn a trick, and I'm flailing and I'm getting hurt and I'm just saying, like, just move on, just move on, go to a different trick, and so yeah, I will feel that, I will feel it, and I'll entertain it, but then I just feel like garbage. I just feel like, what, it's too hard for you? Like, go be a civilian, you know? And so I feel it, yeah, but then I get past it. Yeah. Yes.
When do you know when you love a piece? Like when you've written it so many times that you finally realize you love it?
Yeah. When do I know that I love something that I've written? Usually it's when it feels to me like it's surprised me for the last time. You know, like the story that I read today, there's that line, and again, this was at least the 50th ending that I tried. But there's the line where the father says something like, maybe such extravagant, misguided love was still possible. That was a huge surprise to me, that a father who's worried about his son and there's this kidnapping in the area, like that he would entertain, like maybe there's still a happy outcome of this. That was, I would never think that way. That is not Brett. Brett is a dark person. But that he would think that way felt like a complete gift. And I felt like I had successfully gotten myself out of the way enough for him to tell his story. And so that's as close as I'm going to get to loving something that I've written.
A couple more.
Oh. Yep.
Well, actually, Franklin's barbecue.
Franklin's. This is a hardcore Texas question, asking about barbecue, but Franklin's, what about you? Okay, there we go. Yes, sir. And somebody over here agrees with it too. I'll get you.
If you were ever approached by a studio to make an adaptation of one of your books, whether it be as a movie, TV show, etc., would you take that deal?
I have taken that deal, and if any of you would like to option any of my stuff, please talk to me. But my feelings are that especially with the novels that I've written, I think they would be very, very hard novels to turn into television shows or movies. So my deal with myself is, if I'm going to let someone option it, either they have to convince me that they're going to make a good film or show about it. And if they can't do that, which they usually can't, then they have to pay me to let them consider making a bad version of it. And that is a very expensive choice. So yeah, I'll option anything for the right price. Like, I am really happy to prostitute myself. Yeah.
Is there a community that you belong, like that you feel as though you belong to, like, you know, MMA or skateboarding, that you feel most that you belong to, that you've learned something from them, that you still apply to your writing or something?
Absolutely, and it's skateboarding, and I just have to say, like, I did MMA for like a minute. Like, you guys cannot leave here thinking like, go and say like, oh, Brett was talking about like what a badass MMA dude he was. I was not. I got my ass kicked all the time, and I left. That's my MMA life. With skateboarding, yeah, I mean that community is so amazing, and they give me so much, and I think a lot of it comes down to you don't have to ask for permission. Like you get to live the life that you want to live, and you do that. You do what you want to do until someone tells you no, and then you do it one more time and run away really quick. Like that's a solid life lesson, you know? Don't ask for permission. Yes.
What do you think of skateboarding being an Olympic sport?
So the question is, what do I think about skateboarding being an Olympic sport? I think the Olympics need skateboarding far more than skateboarding needs the Olympics. So I feel largely ambivalent about it, but where I feel excited is for women's skateboarding and for skateboarding around the world, because what it will do, and already has done, is it will introduce skateboarding into countries and cultures that have adamantly opposed skateboarding, and now they want to be in the Olympics. So they're going to embrace it. And so it's going to further diversify skateboarding, and it's going to further enhance the place of women skateboarders that has it's always had a foothold in skateboarding, but what the Olympics is going to do and has done is exponentially expand it so that we get to see all of these amazing women skateboarders that would not normally get the camera turned on them. Yeah.
I'll have one last question.
Okay.
So you mentioned early on that like writing's easy at the beginning, it just gets harder as you go on. We have a lot of like people who are beginning their careers, so maybe
Yeah.
they're in the easy phase.
Yeah.
What makes it get harder in your opinion as the more you do it? Because it feels like you said counterintuitive.
Right. I think you realize that there's you start to understand how many things can go wrong so quickly. Like your field of vision narrows, because when you first start, it's like, oh, I can just do anything. And then when you start thinking, but for the story or the poem or the book or the essay to reward the reader's attention, I can't do anything. I have to make a space for them, and it just completely narrows, you know? But I do think that's true. I believe it with my full heart that writing gets harder the longer that you do it. But it's also true that it gets clearer the longer that you do it. So I think like the metaphor that's been helpful for some of my students is think about a faucet that hasn't been turned on for years. And when you first turn the faucet, all of this orange, brown, sludgy water comes out. And if you turn it off and go away, the next time you turn it on, more orange, brown, sludgy water is going to come out. But if you just leave the tap running, it's eventually going to flush all of that ugliness out, and eventually it's going to become clear, beautiful water that you can drink. You just have to leave the tap on long enough. So I think it gets, even though it's harder, it gets clearer.
Good note to end on. Let's thank Brett.
Thank you guys. Thank you.